I don't have slides. And you might be wondering why a neuroscientist is standing up in front of you today at the School of Social Work. And this is unusual, but maybe not that unusual at Columbia University. My name is Zoe Donaldson. I am a former RWJ Health and Society Scholar here at Columbia. I work as a postdoc in the departments of Neuroscience and Psychiatry. And I think what Dr. Bonanno highlighted today is that grief is actually a pretty universal phenomenon. At some point, most of us will lose someone we love during our life course. And for most of us, we will eventually recover from that loss. However, despite the universality of this phenomenon, we know almost nothing about it at a neuroscientific level. What balances are disrupted in the brain, in the body, that lead to an increased risk for heart attack, stroke, mental illness, and a variety of other disorders immediately following the loss of a loved one? In addition, as he highlighted, certain individuals have a hard time recovering from this initial loss of a loved one. These people are said to suffer from complicated or persistent grief. And we know essentially nothing about the underlying neurobiology of this, what makes certain individuals more likely to develop complicated grief, and what are the best, most targeted therapeutic strategies for these individuals. And so it's questions like this that I think teams of psychiatrists, neuroscientists, social workers, and many others can bring to the table and begin to answer through this center. So on a personal level, I'm honored to be a part of this center. I did my PhD work studying social bonding in an animal model, and I can say that at this point we have a reasonable understanding of the brain mechanisms that allow us to form bonds with one another, whether they be between mates, between friends, between family members, but we have essentially no idea what happens when we sever those bonds, what happens within the brain. And so it's through the beginning of this center and with my colleagues that I hope to begin to examine this question using a monogamous rodent species. So my background, as I mentioned, in social bonding was with this same monogamous rodent species. It's an unusual laboratory animal, the prairie vole. So these animals will typically mate for life. They'll form strong selective bonds with their mating partner, and they'll show a preference to spend time with that partner. They'll raise the offspring together and sort of live this typical home on the prairie lifestyle. And this is in direct contrast with the majority of rodents that we study in the laboratory. So both mice and rats, the ones that you read about in the science section of the New York Times, don't form these bonds between mates. They're promiscuous, and typically just the mothers raise the offspring. And so we know the neurobiological basis of this bonding behavior in voles, and now what we hope to do is disrupt these bonds as a way to begin to understand what happens in their brain mechanistically underlying the behaviors that you see immediately following the loss of a loved one. As you can imagine, this wasn't pointed out earlier, but it's difficult oftentimes to convince people to be research subjects immediately after they've lost a loved one. And some people consider it unethical to ask them at that time in their lives to be part of a research study. And for this reason, to get at the most proximal mechanisms of what happens when you lose a loved one, I think that prairie voles are going to be an incredibly useful model. So for this reason, with the help of my colleagues, I really look forward to the studies that we'll be doing in the next few years to begin to identify translational opportunities to understand the biological mechanisms not only underlying grief, but also complicated grief. And I think this is a topic that's of wide interest to many fields, not the least of which are psychiatry and neuroscience. And I think it's also a testament to sort of the pioneering spirit of Columbia that we're bringing all of these groups together, and to Kathy for putting it together. So thank you.